people would drill and tap it.
I did that one time. Yeah.
The holder of the world record in Pro Street, the KC Turbo crew from Mesa, Arizona.
Welcome back to the KC Turbo Podcast Show. Today we've got your special guest, Jared from Kill Devil Diesel. He was the #1 requested person that we had in the comments to have back on the show. So Jared, welcome.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here. It's very cool.
Yeah. Pretty cool to have you. We're here at the new shop,
Yeah, I say it looks a little different. You guys have done something with the place.
Yeah, we're not like outside, above an office in the dirty, dusty area. We got like a little room to do this in now.
I am very impressed. I'm so happy for you guys. This is an amazing facility you have here.
Thank you. Oh, Cameron. Cameron's here too.
Yep. What's going on, guys?
Usually running the show. I'm here too.
Stepping in. You guys are best pals, so I figured, hey, I need to bring in Charlie, and I'll just sit back and watch the show.
Okay. we do go way back. I sometimes forget. I mean, I want to say 2012 was probably around the time.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah.
Right. That we started talking through the forums. I mean, before all the Facey space. I mean, Facebook was out. I wasn't on Facebook at the time.
Really either, and it was, and back before Facebook and groups and stuff, there was the forums, and I had a 6-liter truck and had all the 6-liter problems.
Blessed with those problems too.
Yeah, and that's how we met. Was just trying to find solutions to all the 6-liter woes. And then, as you learn, it was kind of a cool community. You learn and you help other people learn, and it was a good. I think the information there was, in some ways, not knocking Facebook and whatever, but in some ways was a better platform for the retention of information, because you see the same questions that people were asking 10 and 15 years ago on Facebook every day or every week.
Just daily. It's just like the old thread gets buried. There's no way to really search it on Google. There's no crawlers, and then someone else posts the same question the next day.
And it's funny. I don't know. Maybe you guys run into this. You ever get guys that will find old posts from 10 years ago on the forums still? It's like some of that information. Your phone updates. Everything is updates and new information and stuff. You ever find people still kind of cite the old information sometimes from 10 and 12 years ago?
Today. True story. Today, a customer called in and he was reading some forum post by some Peixinho guy. That was me. That was just me 12 years ago.
Right.
And he was using that guy's information to argue or disagree with my thoughts.
With
today,
Charlie.
Today, Charlie.
Yeah.
With 12 more years of knowledge. But this guy was super knowledgeable. He was like the guy to go to and ask questions to. I still remember. I have your name saved in my phone still as Jared Gearhead 2012, because you were Gearhead 2012 on the forum.
Oh, you got me. And likewise, yours in my phone, Charlie Peixinho Fish.
Still there.
Yep. What? So, fun fact, and I didn't know this for a long time. I've known you for a few years before I learned. What does Peixinho mean?
It means little fish in Portuguese.
Okay.
I am LDS and served a mission in Brazil, and my last name is Fish, and so a lot of people called me Peixinho. That means little fish in Portuguese, and I like it, and it kind of just stuck. So it doesn't mean pixie dust or anything like that. It means little fish in Portuguese. So shout out to all my Brazilian brothers down there, saudades.
Cool deal. It was, once I learned that, it made a lot more sense.
What about the Gearhead 2012?
Mine's not as cool. I just liked cars. Gearhead seemed like it's just
Gearhead
something
was
I came
already
up
taken,
with.
had to throw something at the end.
Yeah, probably came up with it somewhere circa 2012. So not as exciting.
I wish I could go back and delete some of the threads that whoever that idiot was that made them. One that came up recently was I remember EGTs has always been a big issue. Everyone's so worried about EGTs and the exhaust gas temperature, and so I was thinking,
how do we lower exhaust gas?
Right.
And why is exhaust gas? Why does it really matter? But we got to get it cooler. You got to read EGTs.
I didn't
lower
understand
EGTs
why it
are
mattered.
always better.
I didn't. That version of me did not understand why EGTs matter, but I was like, I could come up with a solution to lower exhaust gas temperatures. Yeah. So I drilled holes in the front of my exhaust manifolds, and I put water injection in there to cool the exhaust. So I was like, there you go.
Done deal.
The EGTs read lower, let alone the cylinder temps or anything that's going on.
Everything before that,
who cares? That's not important. EGTs, the pyrometer will read lower. But I've had people pitched that idea to me. Hey, I saw this thing online. Some Peixinho guy, like water injection system in the exhaust manifolds. And that sounds like a really dumb idea.
We figured that one out. That one's no longer a mystery.
I tried it, didn't do anything. I mean, I thought maybe there'd be like this expansion of gases, steam engine driving the turbine wheel. Maybe didn't do it right, but it did not do anything way back then.
Well, and so that's kind of interesting, though, and it's like, and so you tried it, boots on the ground, drilled and tapped exhaust manifolds on what was probably, I assume, your daily driver or something at the time. And
I needed it for my work. It was a work truck. Yeah, I had to have it.
And so, but to learn, it's like, so, and what started as a, hey, my truck won't start, then kind of started to turn into, hey, how can we make this better? Or, hey, here's a problem that keeps happening. And how can, as that iterated, and you and I got in touch, and a lot of the, folks back in the day, is how I met Charlie Keeter and other folks too, and, it's like as that iterated, and then some of the ideas, some of which worked, some of which didn't, and it's like that grassroots level of, community, but also, just development. And I think is what helped get a lot of this started. And, like I said, it's how you and I met and has turned into, the race truck, and you've helped us so much with development. And a lot of people don't realize Charlie's done so much behind the scenes for the industry, that, so far beyond turbos. Obviously, KC Turbo is pretty well known for turbos, but, a lot of people don't know, the behind-the-scenes work that KC Turbos and Charlie has done for the industry for, everything from, compound kits to, calibrations and helping to clean, the reputation of, emissions and trying to improve, all kinds of stuff. Obviously, it's been a huge help to improving our engine program. It's been an honor to learn, and Charlie was one of our earliest, guinea pigs. I say that jokingly, lovingly, but, been one of our earliest supporters as well. And, we've tried all kinds of crazy things, some of which, like the steam idea, maybe didn't work so well. and some stuff has worked great. And, and the cool part is that's allowed us to trickle down, those things, to distill down the very best, to help your customers, to help our customers. And it's been really cool to see that evolution, over the years. And, it's like I said, a lot of people don't see the behind the scenes work that that you guys put in, the testing and the side of the road fixing something, and as that's evolved and how as the company's grown, the resources and everything that can help make it better and better and better for the end user it's been really incredible.
And it's so different back then than it is now. But like you said, did you sit down one day and, you know what? Here's a good business plan. I'm going to go into business trying to fix the most unreliable diesel ever made. No, you owned one, right? And it just, you had to fix it. You had to get up and going. And back then the forum was a different community. Yeah. And then, I remember one of the reasons I reached out to you the most is that you had some thread or write-up online on how to fix 6.0 heads. That was your thing. You've always been in it. You're a gearhead, a little bit of machine work in there. And I wanted to fix my 6.0 heads. And you reached out at the time, the best. I had never heard of anyone O-ringing heads. I'm not as much of a gearhead as you. I know it's maybe you go into a little more of why they do it, why the 6.0 does do it versus fire rings, but I had never heard of it before. I thought you invented O-ring heads.
Yeah, no, I wish I could claim that. We didn't invent O-ring heads. It's an old hot rod trick from the 60s, maybe 70s, and so traditionally it's done with a copper gasket, and you do and we've got some footage or some pictures, we can share, but typically it's done with an O-ring. People hear O-ring, especially when you're reading about it on
rubber
forums.
O-ring.
Yeah, rubber O-ring, and it's like, no. So this is a stainless. We use a hardened stainless wire. It's really hard. It'll actually ruin most like wire cutters if you try and cut it. It's a very hard wire. And so we cut a groove into the head or the block, and we press the wire in. And again, we're not the first ones to do this. We kind of adopted an old hot rod trick and kind of tried to apply it to the diesel world. We've had pretty good success with it, 6 liters obviously. So the problem we were trying to solve, my truck, your truck, and friends and word of mouth and stuff in the early days was trying to solve this head gasket issue.
Because at first it was just ARP head studs. Oh,
sure.
If you just put ARP head studs, then it's fine. Well, maybe you didn't prep the block surface right, or
Sure.
But it seems like this was the thing that really was helping the most. ARP plus. Sure.
Yeah, plus an O-ring, and so we do. In the diesel world, it's a little bit unconventional. You talk to some old school machine shops and stuff, and they kind of look at you funny. To run an O-ring with an MLS gasket, was new, and and I'm not going to claim to be the first ones to try it, but we had success with it. And the theory there is that on an MLS gasket, you've got you've got spring layers and just layers for thickness. And so, when you crush down on those layers, of the gasket, the O-ring is providing extra bite and extra clamp force, kind of like shutting a pencil in the pages of a hardback book. It's going to apply more pressure where the pencil is. And so that's kind of what the O-ring does. And
through the years, now you might not want to share these secrets, but I've worked with lots of different companies. There's a lot of different companies that do O-ring heads, and going through the R&D and early on, I remember at one time trying to find even just the placement of the O-ring was crucially important.
Sure.
The protrusion, I still see to this day. Hey, I ordered O-ring heads from so and stuck them on. Head gasket's blue, and you show the picture of the head gasket, you can immediately see it cut the head gasket, or it stepped up the spring and down the spring because they didn't put it in the right spot. I mean, how crucial is that for O-ring heads to actually see it?
It's pretty critical, and so the factory gaskets, and it's funny, so there's Cometic, and we love Cometic. They do a great job. Felpro, Moly, but they all have what they call an embossed layer. So around the combustion chamber of the head gasket, there's like one of the layers on a 6-liter. It's the second layer up from the block is folded over or folded back. It has like a crimped layer in it, and so it kind of acts like a mini O-ring. Right around about an 1/8 inch back from the edge of the cylinder is what they call an embossed layer, and like I said, it acts like a little mini O-ring. Well, a lot of people get in trouble by having, and it's not a round in a 6-liter. The head gasket bore is not perfectly round. So if you're off a little bit, or doing this manually or something, it's easy to be half on and half off of that kind of embossed layer. And then the protrusion.
It ruins the point of having the O-ring.
Oh, it cuts the gasket.
Go and make a step up.
Yeah, and so. We found being outside of that embossed layer, and then protrusion is pretty critical.
Too little, it doesn't do anything. Too much, cuts the gasket.
Yep, exactly. And so and we found a kind of a sweet spot. You read online 8 thousandths. That's been kind of what works for us. And but then the diameter and then the placement, is has been pretty critical. And
hopefully your competitors aren't taking notes on this video.
So it's we don't have any secrets to hide, but we have found what works for us, and we've tried. And sometimes it takes several iterations, and it takes folks like you to that one didn't work, and to find the one that does work. It's of course a lot easier to copy. I don't say copy is a strong word, but it's easy to do what someone else has done, and I say that in a way that's what we did. We did what worked for big block and small block copper gasket stuff in the 70s, and was like, gosh, we keep having these issues with head gaskets. Let's try an O-ring, and we found success with that. And that's been good. In race car land, we've experimented with other stuff, but for the regular 400, 500, 600 horsepower, and I mean all the way up to 700, 800, 1,000 horsepower in 6-liter land. We've had really good luck with the O-ring, and it's good part is it's kind of a set it and forget it. The fire rings, the hot retorques, and all this other stuff, and the O-rings, commercially were good too because it's everything installs like factory, so there's no. So no retorque. It doesn't take a special gasket. It works with any of the Moly or the Felpro or the Cometic gaskets. And it's been makes it easier on the end user too.
Mm-hmm. You keep mentioning hot rods over and over again. I don't think a lot of people realize that you eat, sleep, and breathe diesels, but you don't necessarily come from a diesel background. I mean, you were very involved in lots of high horsepower methanol builds, gas builds, even well before the diesel industry.
Yeah, I mean, so, and it's funny, Cameron and I were talking, beforehand here, and it's like, how'd you get into this? And how'd you, we're both, our answer was the same, like cars. We just always loved cars, and since I was a kid playing with Hot Wheels and, went to, NHRA events as a kid with, my dad, and, Grandpa started showing me how to work on cars, and, it was, and that's kind of, got me into it, and, worked in in the rebuilding industry for a while, and then I had the opportunity to go work for Monster Jam and Gravedigger building blown alcohol engines, and it was great.
Gravedigger, like you see on TV and stuff?
Gravedigger monster truck, yeah.
You were the man behind the engines. You were just one engine they had in it. They just rebuilt it over and over again?
So I knew Dennis from, and just as a fan, met him, with, thousands of other people at a show, and he would say conned is a strong word. He bribed me to come help him get a new off-road park, a mud park started, and then a few years later had an opening in the engine room for Monster Jam and called and said, hey, I don't know if you'd be interested, and took a job working with Monster Jam under Richard Midget, who's been Dennis's engine builder forever. Well, Monster Jam was owned by Feld Entertainment that owns like Disney on Ice and a bunch of other touring Barnum and Bailey Circus, Monster Jam, etc. And so they own not just Gravedigger but like 60 some other monster trucks, and it's truly a massively impressive operation, and it was a great opportunity to have the ability to work in the racing and motorsports industry 40 hours a week, in a job with benefits, and getting to play with blown alcohol engines every day. And I learned so much from Richard and just the industry and the relationships you make in the broader industry. It was just invaluable. Loved it, and and then also helped, the side work and the hobbies and, cars and stuff. All goes back to just cars and hot rods and, and that's, the hot rodding 101 that putting steam vents in your exhaust manifolds is hot rodding 101. Some of this stuff didn't used to exist. And so, seeing where it goes from an idea to test it to to something that that didn't work, hey, this works pretty good, to something that can now help thousands of other people is is pretty cool, and especially in talking about the forums and how a lot of this started is like seeing we were talking earlier about some of the early turbo creations and some of those things.
Remember the Durastroke?
I remember the Durastroke.
I still get calls on it. Hey, you know what? I was reading online about this innovative idea called the Durastroke. So people may not realize that, 12 years ago, it was a lot harder. The barrier to entry on getting parts manufactured was much harder. And so you kind of just had to take what was available and mix and match it. And there was a turbo company that would take apart Duramax turbos and take the parts and put them together, cut them, weld them, whatever, and put them in Power Stroke
Trial
turbos.
and error.
Trial and error is one of the only or very few options available for the 6-liter at the time. But now that we can actually manufacture our own parts, or now that we've grown, or any other turbo company has grown and making their own wheels, their own housings, there's no real reason to cut apart that old technology and put it back together. But I still get asked about the Durastroke. Oh man, this innovative idea. I just read online about it. The Duramax guys aren't even running their stock Duramax turbos anymore. They're upgrading to other options.
Well, and it's funny, you talk about, sometimes, and it's like they cite old stuff, the conversations that may have even been involved in, and it's like the old Spider-Man meme, where they're all, and he's, we're spoiled now though, today, Charlie, today, Jared, and we live in Disneyland, as far as like manufacturing and technology and having access to those resources to bring stuff to market that didn't exist before, the rapid prototyping. And then, what kind of quality and testing do you think, was happening on those early Durastroke turbos? You go out to the highway and floor it. And I'm not taking anything away from anybody at all, but
it was innovative at the time. And maybe one of the few things that was being innovated for the 6-liter, the worst diesel ever made. I mean, it had a really bad rap back then before a lot of these issues were figured out and solutions were created.
And it's that evolution, it's like this was a little 10% better than it was before, and then 10% better than that, and 10% better, and it takes that grassroots, that grassroots. I'm going to try this and Frankenstein 2 and 3 things together to make it to the next stair step and the next stair step. But to see, like where you guys have gone with turbos, and how. So we kind of live in Disneyland. We're kind of spoiled by how, the 3D printing and, laser scanning of parts and, just the development and the, the manufacturers that we have the privilege of working with, now today is, as an industry is really amazing because, again, the level of product that you can produce, the number of people you can help, now is so vastly, improved, expanded over, what I can do in my driveway, and it's really cool to live in a time where we have the privilege to work with, just such amazing technology.
And I too started in my garage. Was it the garage, a backyard, side yard? I mean,
side of my house in the mud. I didn't even have a gravel to park on, and so you go to jack the truck up, and the jack sinks 6 inches into the mud. It's good.
And how far you've come since then. You are one of the most I mean, you're on the show right now because people literally in the comments on our YouTube channel said, we want to hear from Jared at Kill Devil Diesel. You're so popular in the industry, probably one of the most popular Ford engine builders, but you do Cummins, you do Duramax. I mean, you probably do more than just diesels. I think the only thing that you struggle with is that you are so popular, it can be hard to keep up with demand. I mean, from Jack sinking in the mud 10 to 12 years ago, you have grown leaps and bounds over the past decade.
Man, it's been incredible. It's been, truly the greatest honor, greatest journey of my life, to work with the customers and the, dealers and vendors and everybody that we've worked with. And yeah, I mean, it has been an absolute honor, but we've been blessed with, more demand than we can keep up with.
You grow 10%, but there's 20% more demand, and you grow 10%, and there's 20% more demand.
Yeah, absolutely. We were just joking before the show, talking to one of the monster truck drivers, and how the trucks have evolved. It's like, they jump. The shocks got 20% better. Yeah, well, we jumped 30% higher. It's like, we got 10% more capacity. We got 20% busier, and it's great. I'm so grateful. We are so blessed to have so many amazing, loyal customers and dealers, and we have spent the last few years, especially, really focusing on. It's funny. We talk about hot rods and nerding out on the data logs and camshaft profiles and turbine wheel specs and everything else. And now I kind of get excited about like inventory systems and customer service systems and the things to build out and really support our customers better and deliver better. Operational planning for workstations and setting up the shop to be more efficient. And trying to get more throughput to keep up with demand. And
that can be tough, the demand, especially with a high quality product like yours. I talk with a lot of customers on the phone, and maybe they ask about the lead time on the Kill Devil Diesel heads. And say, yeah, there is a lead time, and the demand is so high because of the product that he's putting out. And I hear, oh, well, so-and-so's got them in stock, ready to ship. They got pallets of them. Why would someone wait? I mean, I know the answer,
sure.
But from the words of your mouth, why would someone wait a little longer for your product versus one of these other ones that are somehow always in stock, always ready to ship, and everybody has them?
So, and I'm not here to knock anybody. We get asked all the time, customers will call in and, so-and-so said they have the same thing, which is interesting that, another business would say, their words would be, we have the same thing as Kill Devil Diesel, which is interesting because I've never used, someone else's
is the
name.
Best form of flattery, right? I mean,
I suppose
you are the pedestal that is being held up that people are trying to be like.
I don't know, but we.
I'm just saying what we see online. I'm not saying that's exactly true, but that it does seem that way.
Well, and so unfortunately, we kind of live. And I'm not, I'm not here to attack anybody, but yeah, we, unfortunately, there's, folks out there that'll use our name to sell their product, which is kind of, it's kind of interesting. And
use your name. I have heard rumors that people have sold KDD heads to people and shipped them something else. Does that ever happen?
We have, it's kind of a little bit of a buyer beware scenario sometimes, and what we hear, also pretty frequently is, it's the same thing, and it's like, well, it's actually probably not, because for a few reasons. Part of the reason, and like I said, we've invested really, really heavily into improving lead times, supply chain management, logistics, and customer support. Over the last couple of years, we've almost tripled the size of our customer support staff, new phone system, everything, trying to keep up with demand and really serve our customers better. And so part of that is also delivering, on product better. And, that's a continual evolution and process. We're making a lot of headway. And so what I mean by that is evolution of the process. For some of these competitors, the process is slap a label on a box and it goes out the door.
What do you mean by that? Are they saying they get pallets of heads straight from China. They don't machine them. They don't pressure check them. They don't check the clearances. They simply not even rebox them and just put a label on it and ship it right to the customer?
I don't want to speak for them and say what they're doing, but we've had people bring us those heads to check out, and if they checked them, they were wrong. The valves didn't seal, the deck surface wasn't straight. Talking about O-ring placement and protrusion, be all over the place. We'll have 2 thousandths of O-ring protrusion on one end of the head and 15 thousandths of O-ring protrusion on the other end of the head. And so, either they're not checking them, or they're sloppy. It's like, which one is it? And so I lean heavily towards probably they're straight off the boat from China. And so, that is one of the things that we take a lot of pride in, and it does take more time to quote unquote do it correctly. And so, again, I'm not here to badmouth anyone, but it is also not the same thing. So when we take a raw casting, and even the casting quality, there's differences in what you specify from a foundry that has in the term you hear in the old school days is, higher nickel. That's a high nickel block, you hear back in the 60s and stuff. And but it's a higher nickel content that makes it a harder material. It's a more durable material, less likely to crack. It is not the cheapest thing out there you can find. Buy the pallet, slap a label on it, and go. So when we get the raw casting, then we go through and do all the final machine work in house. So the deck surface, from the foundry is pretty flat, but it's not perfectly flat. So we resurface them and put the proper surface finish, the proper RA or roughness average.
I've seen pictures of people getting heads, not your heads, and they look like a record.
Yeah.
On there, is that a normal finish, or would you say that maybe wasn't the right finish?
Yeah, that's not the right finish for that application anyway. And so there's surface finish and flatness are both super critical. And so even on a brand new head and it's shiny, you go, yeah, it looks shiny. But if you run, when we resurface it, and we've got some content we can share for that. But when you resurface it, it's got 3 and 4 thousandths of run out in it, where the way the castings arrive, there's run out and tolerance in the deck surface where it's just not straight. There's low spots and high spots, 3 and 4 thousandths, which is it's kind of a lot. And then also the valves don't seal. So we it's kind of a roughed in valve job the way they come. And so a lot of places
fine, maybe they'll start, maybe they won't, maybe
maybe.
they won't notice it right now, maybe later down the road they get a little low compression and the valves weren't sealing.
You might get away with it, but again, the way that when we've had customers bring us heads to check out, and it's like, gosh, this was an assembled head, from another source, and it's funny, you see these things on eBay now for a few $100s, and it's like,
I think that's like $150 is the cheapest I've seen.
Yeah,
the shipping is like $150 on a set of heads. How could they sell a whole set of heads for $150?
For $150, do you think they're checking the valve seat run out on every time? Do you think they're checking the surface finish? Do you think they're checking O-ring protrusion if they have O-rings in them? What material do you think the valves are made of on those heads for $150? And good luck getting a hold of the supplier to even ask those questions.
Or if you have issues,
God forbid you have an issue, an install question. Good luck if they're going to be in business in 6 months. And so, the quality, we use a USA made valve and spring. We do all the finished machine work in-house, and then we assemble everything in-house, by hand. In quality check, we pull a vacuum on every valve seat and make sure everything's, sealed up perfectly. And it does take more time to do it that way. Someone told me once, there's the right way, and then there's everything else. And, we try to stick to the right way because it's, ultimately, if it's something we're going to send to a customer, this is going to go in their truck that's, the family vacation they've been saving up their life for. It's going to be the solve the problem that's left them on the side of the road or whatever it might be, and it's not just me, it's we got a wonderful team back at the shop that, cares a lot about what we do and cares a lot about our customers. And, and so we take that really seriously. It's a kind of an honor to be, think about this. A lot of customers, this was their big purchase this year, and
this could be a big purchase of a lifetime for
Sure.
anyone. I mean, we're talking a lot about heads, but you guys do engines and all sorts of stuff, but those aren't things you're going to buy multiple times. Typically, when you buy a set of heads or an engine for a truck like that,
Sure.
it's all the money you have, and it's the last time that you want to be doing that.
Sure, absolutely, and we take that really seriously, and the products that we put in them, the quality materials that we use, the vendors that we supply, the vendors that we buy from, we hold to a really high standard, and there's ways we could buy cheaper lifters, and we can buy cheaper gaskets and cheaper pistons and that kind of stuff, but it's not worth the risk. It's not worth putting one of our customers on the side of the road because of it, and and then that also, because of the higher quality materials, it allows us to stand behind our products, and God forbid someone does have an issue, we take it very seriously. And
I'm not gonna name names, but I'm just going through my head thinking of all the different head companies I've known over the last decade that were popular, but I don't know if we're in business anymore. I'm not going to throw out a bunch of names. I don't know if it matters anymore, but I'm thinking of some of the I can see these new products hitting the forums, and they were really popular, and then no one ran them anymore, and then you don't hear anything about them anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys have been around a decade now. You guys aren't going anywhere. You are not one of the fads that came out and then went. In fact, you guys just continue to get more and more popular, expanding beyond the 6.0. You guys do 6.4s. You are building a bunch of 7.3s. You're doing 7.3 heads. You have a brand new Cummins.
We sure do.
True factory Cummins head.
Yeah. So through some of our relationships, kind of talk about motorsports origins and stuff, and through some of those relationships in the hot rodding industry, we were able to source a brand new genuine Cummins casting that you don't see very often, available in the aftermarket. And same deal though, we still take even a brand new genuine Cummins head, we start, we do all the finished machine work on it in house and check, deck surface finish. And then we can also offer, the O-rings or the fire rings or the valve spring upgrades, and ultimately that's to meet the use case of the customer. Is it a stock work truck? Is it it's got a KC turbo on it? Injectors. And we talk to customers. I'm sure you guys too. Number one question is what is the truck used for? And for sure we can build, from stock to 2,000 horsepower. We can find whatever the right recipe is.
No, you should just buy the 2,000 horsepower engine and stick it in everything, right? The biggest stage,
daily
whatever,
driver, yeah.
The ported everything. I think that's maybe one of the differences when you talk to someone at Kill Devil Diesel or buy one of their products is you're not just pushing something out the door. I mean, you probably ran most, if not all, these products on your own truck. You developed them, not just picks things from a catalog. So when someone says, this is my daily driver on stock injectors, I just want to pull my trailer for work, you're not going to sell them on a stage 3 cam with ported heads and ARP 625s. You having the knowledge will steer the customer towards the better, maybe sometimes even the cheaper option. Bigger, better, more expensive is not always the best option.
Yeah, we talk more people out of valve reliefs than into valve reliefs, for example. They're a necessary evil if you have to run a larger camshaft and the engine's going to, operate in a range that is going to benefit from, from the camshaft. And then will the camshaft offset the damage done by the valve reliefs enough to be worth it? Sure. But for most people that, are, drive around at 1,500 to 2,500 RPM all day, that's not them. And, they read online though, and they look at it like, looking at a car, it's got, moon roof, leather seats, it's got a backup camera. Well, people look at it and, at an engine, for example, and go, all right, I want the valve relief pistons, I want this, and I want that. It's an option box. They want to check it. It's like, well, hold on, that might not be, the best case scenario for your application.
There is one customer I remember that makes me think of this, that you had a customer, sold everything he owned, and he built himself one of these like excursion camper overlander things, wanted to travel the world, and he went through every catalog of everything, but specifically I think he bought one of your race engines, low compression, valve reliefs, ported heads, I don't know, whatever it was, but then he put it in like a truck that he just wanted to putt around the country.
A 12,000 pound truck to ride and go camping in. And then on top of that, I believe he put every accessory that existed at the time, like
everything.
Coolant filter, bypass filter, oil distribution systems. I'm sure I'm forgetting stuff, but
aftermarket valve covers, anything you could buy that was aftermarket, he stuck on there because he thought the more, the bigger, the better. But how does a low compression engine with valve reliefs and a special fuel bowl radius start at 12,000 feet of elevation in the winter?
Yeah, come to find out, not great.
Not great.
Yeah. And and it's because of customers like that where sometimes and God bless them, but it's like what they want and what maybe they read online on forums and the information that's out there, sometimes what they want might not necessarily be what they need, and we're happy to have a conversation about that and walk people through what is the truck used for, because a lot of those things are a compromise. Also, when you combine 72 different, aftermarket systems, they don't necessarily always play well together, and
they don't always mix. We have a problem with that. Someone orders our aftermarket turbo on someone else's aftermarket heads with someone else's aftermarket fuel system, and they don't always fit right. You get too many of those parts lining up, and something's not gonna line up right.
Yeah, and and so we've actually. We sell engines, we sell cylinder heads and camshafts and components, but we sell a few engines, and we sell a long block. And we get asked sometimes, what's a long block, what's a short block? People kind of get that mixed up with big block and small block, which is kind of funny.
Long block's bigger and better, right?
Yeah, and people ask.
Make more power?
Yeah, we've had the question like, if I buy the long block, do I have to extend my hood or anything? And it's, and it's not making fun of people. If you don't know, you don't know. And while we're, for the record, a short block is the block, the pistons, rotating assembly. Long block is that plus the heads and valve train.
The short block is kind of like the bottom half of the motor.
Bottom end, yeah.
And long block has the top half on there also. But then there's one step further that you're one of the few people that offer. You call them the ready-to-run builds.
So
what does ready-to-run mean specifically?
Pretty much turnkey, ready to drop in, and but tailored to a specific use case. And so you can buy a drop-in from Ford that comes with turbo and injectors and all the same stuff that came on from the factory. That's probably going to fail in the same way it did from the factory.
They're still making the same thing as when these trucks came out. They don't put ARP head studs in them. They don't change some of the things that need to be changed.
Oh, like 6.4s, the piston, design, the pistons crack in 6.4s all the time. And so, we use like a Molly Max or a Max Force piston, so the heavier duty cousin of the 6.4 Power Stroke. We use a heavy duty piston, ARP studs, O-ringed heads, performance, USA, valve springs, and all that good stuff.
But the ready to run, that means injectors, turbo, intake manifold, front cover,
sensors, everything ready to go. And so we were selling long blocks, and we had customers that would buy one of our engines and say, hey, can I also buy a KC turbo from you? If I buy it, would you install it? Like, yeah, sure. And if I buy Warren or full force injectors, will you install them? Sure. That kind of turned into, well, we'll add some manifolds and up pipes and all the sensors, bulletproof water pump, and anywhere that we can make an improvement along the way, bulletproof EGR cooler, anything we can make an improvement along the way, and then tailored to a specific use case. If it's an upgraded stage 1 or 2 turbo, and it kind of takes the guesswork out of it for the customer. What injector should I pair with that? And we get asked that all the time. And and now the ready-to-run packages are actually more popular than the long blocks, and we like it better too because we don't get someone with a, to go for kind of like a niche example, someone with a, 250-100 injector with a stage 1 turbo, and it's they end up in a combination they're not, or like the guy with the, the hippie van, that ends up with a combo that's not really what they wanted.
They thought it was more expensive. They selected more options.
Yeah, if it's an option, it must be better.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a time when it's not better. And so we've put together a few packages that are pretty popular, jumping off points, and they're this fits a stock truck. These are older trucks, 6.0s, 15, 20-year-old truck now. But some of these packages, the y'all's turbos, we can make them drive like a new truck. And I'm very impressed with the truck you have outside, by the way.
Yeah, we've been things have come a long ways in the past decade, but I feel like you can do more with less. Back in the day, for example, 190, 100 injectors in a 6.0, why they were popular, I don't know. I hate that injector size. But I think we've learned to do more with less, and I feel like the knowledge that comes from someone like you, maybe a nerd, I would say. Nerd, would you call yourself a nerd?
I'll take it, yeah.
We were driving to lunch today, and he was talking to me. He's a nerd in everything. He was like, yeah, I'm getting into smoking meat, and I like to look at the PLC controller, and, I can see the fan duty cycle going up and down as I'm cooking the meat at these certain... you take everything to the next level.
To the extreme, yeah.
To the extreme. And that's one of the reasons we love partnering with you personally. We're very well known for our race truck. You build the engine for the quickest 6-liter in the world right now, but you don't just build the engine. You ask, can I see the data logs? I'd love to. Sure. Can I be involved in the dyno? Can I be involved in the sizing of it or the racing of it? You love the data, and I love the data, and I think that goes a long ways for what kind of products are created down the road.
Well, and absolutely, and you ask like, well, why does Ford have a, Le Mans team? We just watched the Ford versus Ferrari movie. It's like, well, why did Ford have a Le Mans? They don't sell a Le Mans car. Why would you, they sell a Ford Focus? Like, why do they, why would they offer that? And like, well, what they learn, on the track for sure. Trickles down and helps make the product, and it sounds silly, for sure helped make the Ford Focus better. And it sounds silly to say that, but it's 100% true. I'm sure you guys have seen what, some of what you've learned, pushing the limits and everything has helped make the...
It trickles down. What you learn, for example, in the engine world, we've tried things out on our race truck that is maybe unheard of, and not all of them are good ideas, but some of the greatest ideas probably ended up eventually in the final production of your products.
Sure.
And we work with a lot of people that do that. We're happy and love to partner with you, but there's a lot of products that we at KC Turbos with the race truck are developing with people. I mean, Oliver with O-Dogs, we worked with him for years. Jesse Warren, we've worked with you. There are compound kits out there. It's funny story. I had someone trying to argue with me, insult the race truck, and he didn't realize the little compound kit he runs on his truck was developed on my race truck. You know,
Sure.
I worked with the manufacturer of that to build it, and a lot of people don't realize
Some of
why
the behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Why have a race truck? You're not running a Stage 1 BGT turbo on there. No, but there are lots of technologies that work their way back down into it. And one big example for you is we are running icon heads on our race truck, and simply bolting on the icon heads spools the turbos faster. We can run a different converter, a tighter converter, because we can get on top of it. It cools EGTs. It added like 80 horsepower. I mean, that's not is that something you just picked out of a catalog? I mean, how much data and research went into creating the icon heads?
So that was a clean sheet rebuild, not rebuild. It was a clean sheet ground up redesign of the factory cylinder heads, and so. The factory cylinder heads, 6.0 or 6.4, 2 intake runners, and they are what is considered like a low velocity swirl port. So if you look at a 12 valve Cummins port or a 7.3 port, it's a bias port, meaning about half the port is blocked off, and their goal is to try and get the air to swirl around the valve and swirl in the cylinder, in terms of what they call mixture motion. So mixing the air and the fuel together, the mixture motion is equally important as the flow. If you have all the fuel in the world, it doesn't mean anything if it can't mix with air. Air, obviously, oxygen being one of the three pretty critical ingredients for combustion on planet Earth. So it has to mix with the air. So mixture motion in a diesel is extremely important, and cylinder swirl is the preferred mixture motion in a diesel, not tumble. So. There's limitations with the factory castings or, any of the factory replica castings, and so we wanted to take some of the newer technology. You look at the port layout of like a Duramax, a 24 valve Cummins, and the 6.7, they're what's considered a high velocity swirl port. And what that means is the port layout, and we've got some data we can show and put up on the screen, but on a 6 liter, the two ports are more or less parallel in one cylinder, two ports per cylinder. On a 24 valve Cummins, Duramax, 6.7 Ford, the two ports are at angles to one another, tangent to the cylinder. And so what that means is the air enters at the edge of the cylinder and creates a swirl effect in the cylinder. And why that's really important is there's no fuel in the cylinder until just a few degrees before top dead center. And so when that injector fires, each one of those fuel vapor droplets, is like a little nugget of fuel. And if it's not completely consumed, it comes out of the tailpipe as soot, which is the enemy, right? If we could have burned that in the cylinder, we'd be going faster. And so it is, also typically lower EGTs. It's better for you're not washing down cylinder walls as badly. I mean, all the trickle-down effects. And so, basically we wanted to take a more modern port like the 6.7 Ford. And so we moved the intake port geometry to basically put I'm oversimplifying it, but a 6.7 port and a 6 liter head. And that allowed us to not only have the flow, but also have the preferred mixture motion instead of porting a factory head. And you can pick up big flow on a flow bench, but we don't race flow benches. And so, you pick up big flow at the expense of mixture motion. So you trade swirl for tumble. And with the tumble, you end up with kind of a pocket of air chasing a pocket of fuel. And it doesn't, that also leads to hot spots in the cylinder. It also leads to, all kinds of other downstream effects, fuel wash in the cylinders, ring seal, et cetera, et cetera.
But porting does make a difference. I mean, back in the day, I remember getting my cast iron factory heads ported, trying to squeeze out every bit of horsepower. But a problem that we ran into is the ports are only so big, right? I mean, from the factory, they only came so big. They didn't make them with plans of people porting them and making them larger.
Sure.
Did you guys take that into account when you guys made your heads?
Yeah, so we actually started with the finish line. So we started with the biggest valve that we can fit safely in the cylinder. And then we engineered a port that is the largest port, or the most effective size port that will work with that valve. And then we base the whole rest of the casting around that port. We did a bunch of other stuff too. We increased the thickness of the deck surface. We added even more gussets around the head stud.
Like on the 6.0 versus the 6.4. I mean, when you look inside a 6.0 head, there's a lot less material, and I think they
on a factory head.
On a
yeah.
factory head. Yeah. The 6.0 made less power. It had one turbo, and the 6.4 compound turbos, more power. Maybe they knew the 6 liters were blowing head gaskets, and they added a lot of extra material. So you can't just add that to a factory 6-liter head, but you incorporated that into the Icon head.
Sure. So we actually added a hole in the water jackets. Were actually one of the trickiest parts of that. Mass Motorsports was a huge engineering partner, manufacturing partner on this project. They're known for their LS heads and in that world, and so they were experts. I knew what I wanted from a performance standpoint, some of the changes we wanted to make. They were experts in helping us with the foundry and with the tooling changes, and I learned a whole lot about the casting process during that project. And so, one of the toughest part, actually wasn't the ports. It was the water jackets. The water jackets were actually one of the toughest parts.
Probably someone doesn't even think about. You wouldn't look at that. I had no idea. The water jackets was like a big part of this.
Yeah, and and it's super critical, especially in a high performance scenario. More boost, more fuel. So there's more heat that we got to get rid of. And if you remember talking about the old forum days, you remember the coolant reroute kits. And they get hot spots in the heads. Crossover, and you drill and tap the head. From the theory is the factory head, and this is true. So the water flow, the path of water flow on a 6-liter comes, 6.4 comes in through the front of the block, goes through the block up into the heads, and then it's supposed to go through the heads, back down into the block and in the front cover and returns to the radiator to be cooled. Well, the theory is the water in the back of the motor in the back of the heads goes up into the head and doesn't have anywhere to go in theory, and it just sits there and boils. So people would drill and tap it and then run some rubber hose up to the front of the drill and tap into the front cover so the water would return and make a loop. And the quote unquote
I did that one time. I was one of those guys that tried that, trying to stop the 6-liter from blowing head gaskets.
Well, and that's great, and maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. I've never pulled an engine apart and said, gosh, this wouldn't have failed if only it had a coolant reroute kit, And more often than not, you find, a bunch of cheapo fittings and a, 2-cent rubber hose clamp that rusts out and fails, and now you've created an extra leak point that, trying to solve a problem, leaves you on the side of the road. And, so it's like a lot of these kind of, I would say gimmicks is a strong word, but a lot of these, aftermarket fix-it type, solutions are, less than ideal, and so when we on the 6-liter, the way we did the Icon heads was we wanted to do one casting for a 6.0 and a 6.4, and then just machine it into a 6.0 or a 6.4. So we had to make a lot of, so then the engineering to combine those water jackets and bring in the extra gussets and reinforcements from the 6.4 into the 6-liter. And then the 6.4 actually came with a dual layer water jacket from the factory. So what that did is kind of allowed, it adds a ton of extra strength. So it's like having another deck surface halfway in between the valve spring floor and the deck surface. So it actually is like having a third story in there kind of that helps give you more rigidity across the casting. But then also with that dual layer water jacket, it actually gives the water a place to return to and flow through the head better. So better block cooling, better head cooling, and now no need for a cheapo coolant reroute kit that potentially is an extra leak point. And so that's kind of combining some of the OE technology and OE improvements in an aftermarket perform their aluminum
the aluminum. That's the thing aluminum isn't as rigid, right? Would a manufacturer ever put aluminum heads on a diesel motor? I mean, because the 7.3's cast iron, the 6.0, the 6.4, I mean, did they ever put aluminum heads on factory vehicles?
Well, that's funny. We get that question all the time. Yeah, it's like the Duramax and so on. It's had aluminum
Duramax,
heads,
that's right.
And then of course the 6.7 Ford it has aluminum, and we get a lot of the
almost like that's where technology is going.
Almost like that, yeah.
Almost like that.
It's also like, hey, and we get a lot of smart comments about, well, Google the melting point of aluminum. It's like, hey, genius, what do you think your pistons are made of? So it's it's kind of funny. Yeah, no, they hold up great. It was really, really good. It was also called permanent mold tooling, and so the casting consistency and quality, and it's an OE foundry that we use, and it's a really, really good grade of aluminum too. I remember. in old machine shop days, we used to rebuild heads for a shop down the road, and there were these 2.2 liter, I think 2.2, maybe someone out there correct me, 2.2 liter 4-cylinder Chevrolet engines, and the casting quality, if you looked at the cylinder head, it looked kind of like those like 7-Eleven styrofoam coolers, like you can almost see through it, and so this is not that, this is a really OE grade casting. It's if you were to look under a microscope at a 6.7 Ford head or the Icon heads, it was a really consistent casting quality, and so that's been great. And we get questions all the time about the different expansion rates, and really as long as the surface finish of the gasket is correct with an MLS gasket and an O-ring, you don't really have any head gasket issues.
I mean, one of the reasons they have the MLS gaskets, they are able to move slightly.
People don't think about it. Everything in an engine, even at factory power levels, moves around. It's like kind of part of the reason engines have tolerances a little bit. Is for heat and expansion, contraction, but also everything kind of moves around a little bit, as the piston comes up and compresses the air, and there's, hundreds or thousands of PSI of cylinder pressure, which, we're actually hoping to do some testing on here real soon. That's trying to lift the head off the block, and that has to be able to kind of move and flex around a little bit while still maintaining a seal, which is why the gaskets have the spring layers. You have shim layers and spring layers, and those spring layers have to be able to move without losing seal, and that way it's like a bungee cord. It has to be able to stretch, to actually hold something down. So it's and so that's
because a lot of people think, I'm going to run a graphite composite gasket, like on the 7.3, but most OEs and most have moved to the MLS gasket for those reasons.
Yeah, and so we actually, even on our 7.3 engines, we use an MLS gasket on all of our 7.3 engines now, and it's just more modern technology.
You're bringing the modern technology all the way back to 7.3s. And
absolutely.
That's what I feel like the Icon is if Ford was to make the 6-liter today, they make the 6.7.
Sure.
But if they were to make the 6-liter today, I'm sure a lot of these things would have been taken into account, but they don't. And they have not continued to develop the 6.0. The 6.7 is a great engine. They put a lot of time, effort, and energy into it. But maybe one of the reasons that you have been so popular is you're taking some of these modern technologies and making it available to the older guys. I mean, the Icon heads, it's got 6.7 ports. It's got flow like a 6.7. It's thicker like a 6.4. It's as cast, larger ports than the biggest ported stock heads you could get, and you combine that all together. These guys are getting huge advances in technology from just a cylinder head.
Well, and you'd said something a minute ago. The factory head or any kind of factory replica, factory replacement style head, you're going to be limited to the casting that you're working with. You're going to be limited to the amount of material that's there, which is they designed it around a little port that's it's very small. And so you can make the port bigger. If you make it bigger, it'll flow more. But it's like, gosh, you sure hate to invest $5,000 in a set of ported factory heads from the crack a week later, a month, a year later, because the casting wasn't designed for that larger port from the start. You've weakened the casting, and or in heaven forbid on the factory castings, you invest all the time and money in a set of ported heads for the injector bore to crack, and
probably not much of a warranty on that, right? I mean, they're not going to just.
I don't know. It's like, gosh, for us, it
a year later it cracks and you're having issues. A lot of times you just can't get a hold of that company anymore.
It wasn't worth the gamble for us. Is why we kind of sought out a new casting, so we weren't limited by the factory casting anymore. And it's worked out really well. From we get a lot of questions. Sure, the billet race head, and while we've used them on race trucks.
I remember that was really popular for a few years. There was like a 3-piece billet, something that you were supposed to bolt together. I never knew anyone that ran them, and they were.
I do.
Oh, you do. Oh,
yeah.
Okay, but they're not around anymore. Like I don't.
So I've had my hands on those heads, and I won't name anybody. I won't speak for anyone else. But they did not. They're not still in service. They don't. They didn't work, and so. There's been attempts at billet and race heads and other things too. And Jesse's got a set of billet race heads, for ductile that he came out a year or two ago that I think are pretty amazing too. This other deal was a billet aluminum,
3-piece held together, bolted with
I'm not knocking anybody, but I just don't think it really worked. But the Icon heads, they're not just a race 2,000 horsepower head. I mean, we use them. They come on our several other different engine packages. So like we would pair those with like a stage 2 turbo, and or we do the ported version of the icons. And you said as cast.
Sorry, what does as cast mean for the people that don't know what that means?
So we get a lot of questions on that. It's kind of a funny, like it's a who's on first type joke. We get all the time is like, did you want the as cast heads or the ported heads? And like, no, I don't want cast iron heads. I want the ported heads. And like, I want the icon heads. And like, did you want the as cast icon heads or the ported icon heads? No, I don't want cast heads. I want so we kind of changed the verbiage to street port and then CNC port. And so we designed, the perfect port layout and changed, the swirl and the port arrangement. And so they were designed to the way they are as cast, the way they're cast from the mold, from the foundry, to outflow basically what a ported factory head does. Cast iron heads and the factory ports, you're limited to what's there. We changed the overall design, to have more material around the shape and alignment of the ports. But the port that comes out of the mold on the icon heads is larger and already flows more than a ported factory head does. Then we also offer that in an oversized valve CNC version. And so the icon heads come in what we call a street port because it was too confusing to say cast or as cast, or so we could, street port, and then a CNC port. The street port icon heads are, they already outflow all the performance without really the downsides of a ported factory head. And then we offer a large valve CNC version of that as well, which is what's on the race truck.
So from stock trucks to some of the quickest trucks in the world. I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to throw some of the names out there, but quickest 6-liter in the world, running Kill Devil diesel engine. Brian Jellish, one of the fastest 7.3s in the world, if not approaching that. I think he has a Kill Devil diesel motor in his truck.
Sure does.
I know you guys work a lot with Rudy's and Nathaniel, running your parts and pushing stuff.
Yep.
I mean, you guys are just all over the place. When there's a big name and they're pushing power, they're typically got KDD backing. And I don't think that's just for the parts. I think it's the knowledge, the support. You're willing. It's you. I mean, people want you, Jared, not just your
reason
product.
why we call you. Hey, Jared.
Well, and for me, it's them. It's the car. Talking like, well, how'd you get into this? Well, for the cars, and that's for me is to learn from you. I'm asking for the data logs for selfish reasons because I want to learn and see how did that did the steam thing work or not? And as that's
patent pending on the turbine wheel steam engine.
Yeah. And so, we, that's, for me, for selfish reasons, like, just to learn, it's like, what did, we made a change. Did it have the anticipated result? Yes or no, and then if yes, good, continue. If no, all right, back up and change the next thing. And that iterative process, has been, has been really cool just to watch as the whole, because, and I'm just honored to be a part of it because you look at the diesel industry and how the records, I'd love to look up the records from 5 years ago and 10 years ago, not just the power stroke world, but just in general, and not even just drag racing,
Charlie Keeter being one of them, 5-year-old record, Kill Devil diesel engine. I mean, you
sure.
You've been around setting records for years, but they've changed a lot too in the past 5 years.
Well, and our products and all have changed and evolved and gotten better, and your turbos have changed, evolved, and gotten better, but the whole is so cool to be part of the diesel industry because it's kind of the Wild West. There's so much development, I think, to be done in the diesel world that just hasn't been done yet. The data and that didn't. It didn't exist. It's kind of cool. It's like, in a way, you guys are pioneers of some of the stuff you're doing. Some of the stuff you figured out to make your race truck do that no one has done, as far as using the factory ECU in a way to do things, to control things that it was never meant to control, is really amazing to see. And again, it just pushes the envelope, and it's that iterative 10% better and 10% better than it was before. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, but ultimately it pushes towards a better and better product. And it's just cool to see, in my time in the industry, so far, to be part of, the industry has grown. Cummins, Duramax, Power Stroke. There's so many. Like I said, we kind of live in the Disneyland of, technology, and it's just cool to be a part of that and watch that grow.
Disneyland of technology, but something that you said that stands out to me is I feel like the diesel world is maybe a decade or so behind the gas world. I mean, not just in the racing applications, but for example, in the gas world, you can take a Coyote F-150, bolt on a Whipple supercharger, make 250 extra horsepower. EO certified, runs like stock, and Ford will let you keep your warranty. That's not available yet in the diesel world, but there are manufacturers like KC Turbos, like Kill Devil Diesels that are pushing for those options, and that's only going to become from nerds like you or me that study the data and push it forward. You're not just buying some cheap knockoff cast iron head straight off the boat from China pushing out the door. You're developing bigger, better, modern technologies, and you're putting them on these trucks, and you're pushing the industry forward as a whole. And as you move the goalposts, people are going to try to catch up to the goalposts, and then hopefully you continue to move it, and the competition is healthy. If people wanted to reach out to you or to your company, what's the best way for them to do that?
First, thank you for having us here. It's an honor to be here. We love to come out and visit you guys. It's amazing to see you guys grow. We are sales at killdevildiesel.com is the best way to reach us, or give us a shout, 252-725-1222. We have a team of people that can help answer questions and get you the right combination configuration for your vehicle, or of course follow us on social media, and shoot us a message. We'd love to chat with you.
All right, thanks, Jared. Great having you here.
Thank you.